What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Pillars Unpacked. Thank you so much for tuning into the channel and to today's episode. Today's episode is going to cover the Church of Saint Gervais in Paris, France. This is in the 4th arrondissement or district of Paris, and this is in the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Paris. So let's take a look at the footage of the church, and then we'll come back after to discuss some details in its history. So a quick programming note before we dive into the specifics of this church. It's been a few weeks since I've had a video up on the channel, and that's mainly because my wife and I traveled to Europe recently. We had a really good time, and we split our time between Paris and Amsterdam. So I have a lot of content to come on the channel in the coming months. Honestly, I got to see a ton of really cool churches and cathedrals, so I'm really excited about that. And I think what I'm going to plan to do from like a scheduling perspective is this week, obviously, I have a church covering from Paris, and then I think next week I'll do one from Amsterdam, and then the one after that do a local church episode, and then kind of just like keep that pattern rolling for a while, and then just kind of see how it works and everything that I have to cover. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of content, especially from Paris, which is a historic and iconic city. And I got to see a ton of different churches. So I think there's going to be a lot of cool things to discuss and talk about, and some kind of nuances with some of these cathedrals in particular that we haven't discussed yet on the channel. So hope you guys are looking forward to all that. Definitely stay tuned for all of it. And just really excited that got to go to some very old, Paris and Amsterdam in particular are very old cities. So naturally, not just the churches, but a lot of just the government buildings, like getting to take in kind of all the architecture and all the history from all that is really cool. So just excited to get to talk about all that in the coming episodes. So definitely stay tuned for all of that. But for now, I think that's going to be my tentative plan, is do, an episode from Paris, then one from Amsterdam, and then kind of a local one, and just kind of rotate it from there. But I'll definitely give updates on the channel as we go on things like that as well. So some details on this church in particular. It's called the Church of Saint Gervais and Saint-Protais. I'm going to butcher probably a lot of these French pronunciations of these churches. I'll try to do my best in like the video title and description to give like what the English translation would be, and then also like put in parentheses what more of like the French spelling and how it looks and everything like that. But Saint Gervais and Saint-Protais are two very early Christian martyrs from Italy that the church is named after. I think just you mainly see, if you were looking online, you would just see it as the Church of Saint Gervais is the main way that it would pop up, but that is the full title of the church. Like I mentioned, this is located in the 4th arrondissement or district of Paris, and to kind of give some kind of location perspective with it, it's located directly across, or actually it's kind of behind, but it depends on what entrance you're looking at, but the Hotel de Ville, which is essentially the Paris City Hall. So it's definitely in a very busy kind of hustle and bustle area of the city, if you will. And the Hotel de Ville has been in that location for like hundreds of years, and there's a lot of different periods of history that we can talk about and discuss, but in particular, like the days of the French Revolution, even kind of the build up to the French Revolution and the fallout from it, there was a ton of central activity happening at the Hotel de Ville, in terms of just like demonstrations, protests, insurrections happening, in addition to just everything that the Paris Commune was doing at the time from a kind of political perspective. So this church would have seen a lot of that activity, and I think it was built in such a prominent area kind of for that reason. It also, this church like site location, there's allegedly been a church on this specific like area dating back to the 7th century, and I think that was mainly because this church is very close to the Seine, and there's a historic port that used to be there. So I think it was built in this area for that reason, kind of from a lot of foot traffic in that perspective. So the actual construction of the modern present-day church that you see today was built between 1494 and it was finished in 1657. That's obviously an extended period of time. A large reason for that is, and this is going to be probably a topic of discussion on a lot of the episodes that we talk about from Paris, but the broader Protestant Reformation, and then specifically in Paris, the French Wars of Religion, and I guess this was happening all across France between Protestant and Catholics, really caused some upheaval and religious turmoil, and because of that, there were some delays in the construction of the building, and a large part of that is a large part of the like extended period of time that it took was because of this. And it actually took so long that you see different styles. A lot of the interior designs were largely Gothic, and then the exterior, the facade, was built in the newer French Baroque style, which I think is kind of interesting to note. From a perspective on the interior, I love it seems like kind of a simple design, but the vaulted ceilings kind of giving way to those arched stained glass windows kind of all the way across the nave, I think is absolutely beautiful. It's bright. It draws the light in. It pulls your eye upward. And I think that's really, really a nice feature. And then there is at the very back of the church, there's a chapel of Mary. It's like directly all the way back, kind of behind the main like high altar area of the sanctuary. And again, that also, it kind of like completes the look of the stained glass. And I love the way that the light was brought in there. And I like that kind of just like small space in general. And then also I like the view from the transept, because either end there were separate side chapels, and I thought they were just like elegantly designed, and they were quite beautiful in their own right. So I really like that. And there were other chapels that went all the way down the sides of the nave, but I thought in particular the two that were in either side of the transept, and then the chapel to Mary at the very back of the church, I think were my favorites. And I actually, I mistakenly said temple because part of what I wanted to say was during the French Revolution in the early 19th century, this church was like a lot of churches in Paris. They were, it was stripped from its current use as a Catholic church, and it really was a broader. It was kind of a broader attempt from the newer National Assembly governments at the time to remove a lot of the influence of the Catholic Church from kind of like a organizational kind of governmental oversight perspective, and a lot of the actual like church buildings and lands were nationalized. And this was an example of that. So it ceased to function as a Catholic church at the time, and it was used as a quote unquote temple of reason, which was one of those like, it was definitely a product of the Enlightenment, but it kind of represented a trend of what some of those national bodies were trying to pull away from organized religion. So this was used as a temple of reason. And then obviously after the revolution, when things from the perspective of the relationship between the government and the church kind of stabilized, in particular the Catholic Church with the Concordat that Napoleon signed, kind of stabilized things. This returned to use as a church in the Catholic Archdiocese of Paris. So that's why temple came to mind. But so to talk about the exterior a little bit, like I said, the facade of the church from the exterior was built in the newer French Baroque style. I love the look of it. And Voltaire, who's a political and religious philosopher from the time in France, definitely his name is synonymous with the Enlightenment. He famously quipped that it was the most beautiful facade in Paris that you could not see. So at the time, currently now, which I think it's quite a beautiful space, and definitely a space for quiet contemplation. There's a memorial garden for the victims of the Paris attacks, right across from the main entrance or main facade of this church. So I think that's kind of like a very nice space for quiet reflection, and I definitely thought it was a nice tribute to the victims of the Paris attacks from 10 years or so ago. But apparently at the time there were buildings that, and this is the case from a lot of churches that I saw in Paris and Amsterdam for that matter, but some buildings were built so close together in these really old cities that you cannot really appreciate a lot of the details and intricacies of the design, especially from the exterior of a lot of these Gothic churches that have just like all the way up to the very top. All of these just kind of like ornate designs and gargoyles and dramatic arches and things like that are really hard to see. This one's a little bit better now that those buildings were since demolished, and it's a little bit more open. You can see again from kind of like across the street, the back of the Hotel de Ville, straight across to the main entrance or facade of this church. So it's nice from that perspective that you can appreciate it more. So that famous quip from Voltaire, I think, has kind of been dealt with from that perspective. But down the sides of either of the building, it's still kind of the same way. I showed some clips from the back. That's about the only other perspective you can get from the church besides the front, because there are buildings that they're very, very narrow alleys on either side, and you really can't get a perspective of it unless you were to have a drone or some other way you can see it from an aerial perspective. So the other thing that I want to highlight, or I guess I should say I'm not a music person, but the organ in this church, there were a couple of very famous composers that worship here at the time and used the organs that you can still see in the church today. And so because of that, this church has become famous for its use of that really old organ, and there's concerts and other things that are held there from a music perspective. So I think that's worth noting, even though I'm not much of a music person, so I don't really understand a lot of the intricacies there, but it's kind of cool that there is something extremely old like that organ that you can still see today and is quite famous. The other part, I guess it's a sad part of the history. During World War One, this church was actually bombed and the roof collapsed during Holy Week while a service was being held, and almost 100 people died. So I think it was one of the worst losses of life in Paris any time during World War One during that bombardment from Germany. So definitely very sad, but there's a lot of history that's wrapped up here. Again, because this church goes so far back when it was started being constructed, and then going through the French Wars of Religion, making it through the French Revolution, and then again extending or dealing with more kind of extended modern historical stuff like that. The only other thing that I think I would note is that this church kind of, it's not a parish church anymore. It still operates under the broader like Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Paris, but it's a specific headquarters for the monastic fraternities of Jerusalem. So it doesn't have the same like parish functions that a traditional church does, but it did. I think this specific religious order is built on like monastic life in like more urban settings, and they deal with a lot of liturgical practices and other kind of things like that. So they're headquartered here, and that makes it kind of an exception to the main like parish church perspective. So this was an interesting church to see. I enjoyed it. I love the interior of it, and I thought that kind of like the main viewpoint of the facade from that memorial garden was quite beautiful, and there is a lot of history wrapped up in it. So like I said, this is going to be the first of many churches to cover from Paris. I think this one it's in a very cool spot because it's quite close to the Paris City Hall. So there's a lot of history that's kind of wrapped up in that. So definitely stay tuned. There's going to be a lot more to come, but yeah, hope you enjoyed getting to see this church, excuse me. And thank you so much for tuning into this episode. And until next time, keep looking up.